Some silences are heavier than any scream. Welcome to Widow's Hollow Cave System, a place where the Appalachian mountains breathe and the darkness listens. My name is Eli Maddox, a combat engineer seeking peace, but I found myself on a night shift, governed by strange rules, designed to survive something unseen, something ancient. What's the darkest, most claustrophobic place you've ever been? Tell me in the comments below. And if you're brave enough to descend into the abyss, subscribe to Night Creepypasta Rules and ring that bell. Because here the echoes aren't just sound, they're memories. The watch begins after my last tour in Afghanistan, a tour that ended with me buried in the dark for 17 hours, listening to the strained breathing of my friends become silence. I thought I could handle any kind of quiet. I was wrong. I came to the night shift at Widow's Hollow Cave System to find a silence that didn't scream, a darkness that didn't have a weight. I came here to heal. Instead, I found a place that listens. The job description was simple: night ranger, park security, and maintenance. A quiet paycheck for a quiet man. They didn't tell you that the air in these Appalachian caves, even near the entrance, breathes a deep, foundational cold, a dampness that clings to your clothes and smells of wet limestone, decaying leaves, and something else, something ancient and sorrowful, like forgotten grief. My orientation wasn't a tour. It was a greasy, laminated card handed to me by a weary-eyed senior ranger, his face a roadmap of worry. On the card were 5 rules. Rules, he said, were more important than any compass or headlamp. Rules, he said, for staying on the right side of the mountain's moods. Always carry a silver whistle. If you get lost, blow it 3 times and wait. Always knock 3 times before entering any new chamber. If you hear 3 knocks back, do not proceed. If you find a locked wooden box in the dark, leave it alone. Always greet the first bat you see with "Fly safe tonight." Never take the same path in and out of the cave. The ranger I was replacing, a fresh-faced kid named Peterson, had supposedly just quit. No call, no show. A city kid couldn't handle the isolation, they said. But on my first walkthrough, just inside the gaping toothy maw of the main cave entrance, I found his silver whistle lying on the damp ground, its smooth mouthpiece dented, as if it had been dropped by someone who desperately had no more breath left to blow it. My name is Eli Maddox. I used to be a combat engineer in the army. My specialty was understanding how things break, how to support a failing structure, how to listen to the groans of stressed earth, and know when it was about to give way. The irony was not lost on me. Here I was, in the biggest, most complex, and most stressed structure I had ever encountered, and my only tools were a flashlight and a list of what sounded like backwoods superstitions. The ranger station was a small, lonely cabin, a quarter mile from the cave entrance, an island of warm light in a vast, dark ocean of forest. My staff, if you could call them that, were a collection of souls as weathered as the mountains themselves. Dr. Luan Cross was my official supervisor, a respected archaeoacoustician from a university, here on a long-term grant to study the unique resonant properties of the caves. She was a woman in her late 40s, sharp and articulate, her scientific rationalism a comforting if slightly brittle shield. She was the one who gave me the laminated card. Think of them as a tradition, Eli, she'd said with a reassuring, academic smile. These mountains are old, and the people who have worked here for generations have developed routines. They're based on geological eccentricities, odd air pressure shifts, unique echo patterns. It's all scientifically explainable, of course, but the folklore is a useful shorthand for navigating the cave's quirks. Her explanation was so plausible, so neatly packaged that I almost believed her. Then there was Gary Bell, the day shift ranger, a man who seemed to have been carved from the mountain itself. He was grizzled and stooped, with eyes that had seen too many long winters. He had a habit of talking to himself in low, murmuring tones. He was the one who, after seeing me almost ignore a flitting brown bat near the entrance, had gripped my arm with surprising strength. "You greet the first one, son," he'd rasped, his voice like grinding stones. "You show respect. You say, Fly safe tonight. The mountain likes good manners. Rounding out the crew was Jamie Baird, a seasonal guide in his early 20s, all boundless energy and vlog-ready charisma. He was a survivalist blogger, his confidence bordering on reckless arrogance. He scoffed at the rules, calling them spooky campfire stories to scare the tourists. He saw the cave not as a living, breathing entity, but as a backdrop for his next great adventure video. He was a complication I didn't need. For the first few nights, the job was exactly what I thought I'd signed up for. Silence, solitude. I'd make my rounds, my powerful flashlight beam cutting a clean, logical path through the immense silent darkness. I'd check the pressure gouges on the emergency gates, inspect the handrails on the tourist paths, and listen to the gentle, rhythmic plink-plonk of water dripping from ancient stalactites into still, clear pools. The silence was deep, but it was a clean silence. On my third night, the first test came. I was doing my sweep near the entrance of the Grand Cathedral, the largest open chamber on the tourist route, when a small brown bat detached itself from the ceiling and swooped past my head. For a moment, I just watched it go. The rules seemed absurd. But then I saw the dented whistle I'd clipped to my belt, Peterson's whistle, and I remembered Gary's fierce insistence. Feeling like a complete fool, I whispered into the vast, dark space, "Fly safe tonight." The bat, which had been heading deeper into the cave, suddenly banked, circling back once, a silent, fleeting shadow in my beam. It dipped its wing, a gesture so deliberate it couldn't have been a trick of the air. Then it vanished into the darkness towards the cave mouth. I stood there, a strange chill crawling up my spine. It was probably nothing. A coincidence. I turned to continue my patrol, moving away from the entrance chamber. The sound of my own boots crunching on the gravel path was the only noise. I took maybe 10 steps. Then, from the darkness behind me, from the direction of the entrance I had just left, a sound drifted through the air. It was a perfect, clear echo. It was a perfect, clear echo, not of my footsteps, but of a whisper. And the voice was, without question, my own. "Welcome home," it said. The sound of my own voice echoing back at me from an empty cave was a deeply unsettling experience. It was a clean, perfect mimicry, not the garbled, fading repetition you'd expect. I swept my flashlight beam back across the vast chamber, its powerful light finding only the cold, indifferent stone of the stalactites and the damp, glistening walls. There was nothing there. I told myself it was a fluke, a bizarre acoustic anomaly of the kind Dr. Cross had so rationally described. But the hair on my arms stood on end, and the silence that followed felt different. It was no longer empty. It was listening. For the next week, I threw myself into the job with a veteran's discipline, trying to impose logic on a place that seemed to actively resist it. I learned the map tourist paths by heart, the twists and turns of the dragon's spine, the oppressive humidity of the steam room, the dizzying drop of the bottomless pit. But I also became acutely aware of the unmapped darkness that lay just beyond the safety railings, the countless black mouths of unexplored passages that led into the mountain's deep, silent guts. My interactions with the others became a study in contrasts. Dr. Cross would engage me in long, fascinating conversations about spiritems and the unique mineral deposits that, she claimed, could store and release sound in unpredictable ways, offering a neat, scientific box for every strange thing described. Jamie Baird, on the other hand, grew bolder in his mockery of the rules. He'd loudly announce his presence when entering new chambers and deliberately retrace his steps, laughing when no ghostly retribution befell him. "See, it's just a cave," he'd say with a cocksure grin. "You've spent too much time listening to old Gary's stories." Gary himself remained a creature of quiet, grim routine. He'd show me how to patch a broken handrail or reset a faulty generator, his knuckles scarred and battered from a lifetime of hard work. And he'd offer his own quiet warnings. "Don't you mind that boy," he'd said to me once, nodding towards Jamie. "This place is patient. It don't mind a bit of loud noise." It just waits till you're somewhere it can really talk to you. Somewhere new. His words proved prophetic. It was a Tuesday night, and Jamie was on a mission. And he was determined to get footage for his survival blog of the Whispering Falls, a newly surveyed chamber off the main path, known for its strange, flute-like acoustics. I was tasked with accompanying him to ensure he followed park safety protocols, a job I was already beginning to dread. The passage to the new chamber was narrow and low, forcing us to stoop. It opened into a small, unremarkable antechamber, with another dark opening at its far end leading, presumably, to the falls. Gotta follow the rules, right, Sarge? Jamie said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. He turned to the dark opening and, with theatrical flair, knocked 3 times on the stone wall beside it. Knock, knock, knock. The sound was sharp and loud in the enclosed space. I held my breath, a cold knot of dread tightening in my stomach. For a moment, there was only the sound of dripping water. Then, from the deep, absolute darkness of the passage ahead, an answer came. It wasn't an echo. It was a distinct, deliberate reply. A flat, dead sound, like stone striking stone from a great depth. Knock, knock, knock. My blood ran cold. The sound was a perfect, chilling mimicry, yet utterly devoid of life. It was a mocking confirmation. "Don't go in there, Jamie," I said, my voice low and urgent. "That's the signal." We turned back. Jamie just laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. He switched on the camera mounted to his helmet. "It's just an echo, man. A weird one, sure. But that's gold for the channel." He looked at me, his eyes shining with reckless excitement. "You're not really falling for this stuff, are you?" Before I could grab him, he turned and stepped through the opening, into the waiting darkness. "Jamie!" I yelled, my voice swallowed by the oppressive silence. I took a step forward, my flashlight beam piercing the gloom. The passage was empty. It wasn't long, maybe 20 feet before it opened into another chamber. But he was gone. He had vanished from sight and sound in the space of a single footstep. I called his name again and again, my voice sounding small and foolish against the immense ancient silence. The only reply was the steady, indifferent drip of water. He was gone. The official response to Jamie's disappearance was a masterclass in controlled bureaucratic procedure. I reported it immediately, my voice frantic over the radio. Dr. Crossenmayer, Carol Blount arrived within the hour, their faces etched with concern that felt rehearsed, practiced. The mayor, a sharp woman with a politician's smile and a shark's eyes, spoke of liability in press releases. Dr. Cross spoke of established park policy. "For an experienced hiker and survivalist like Mr. Baird," she said, her voice a calm, rational balm on my raw panic. "A 48-hour waiting period is standard before we escalate to a full-scale search and rescue. He likely found another exit and lost his equipment. Let's not be premature." Her calmness was more terrifying than any outburst would have been. She was managing the situation, not responding to it. They were treating Jamie not as a missing person, but as an unfortunate, predictable complication, a piece of data that needed to be properly filed away. The next 2 days were an agony of waiting and guilt. I couldn't shake the image of Jamie's cocky smile as he stepped into that listening darkness. I had failed to stop him. My own mantra, the one drilled into me in the service, "Leave no man behind," was a bitter pill in my mouth. Defying their orders, I spent hours poring over the cave schematics, trying to find any connecting passages, any other exits from the chamber where he had vanished. There were none. It was on the second night of the wait that Gary Bell found me in the ranger station, staring blankly at the maps. He didn't say anything at first, just poured 2 cups of thick, black coffee from a thermos. His hand, I noticed, was trembling slightly. "It's got him," he finally said, his voice a low rumble of resignation. "The boy was a fool. He didn't listen. Now the cave's got him." He pushed a small leather-bound book across the table towards me. It was worn, its cover soft with age, its pages filled with a faded, spidery script. "The ranger before your predecessor, a fella named Thompson. He wrote this. He was here during the big disappearances in the 70s. He started putting the pieces together, the rules. Gary tapped the book. Read it. Might help you understand what to listen for and what not to listen to. Thompson's journal was a descent into madness, written in the methodical, precise hand of a man trying desperately to apply logic to a world that had abandoned it. The early entries were mundane, patrol notes, geological observations, but then they grew agitated. He wrote of feeling watched, of hearing whispers that sounded like his wife calling his name from passages he knew were empty. He wrote of tools going missing, only to reappear days later in a different part of the cave, cleaned and polished. He documented the rules, piecing them together from fragments of local legend and his own terrifying experiences. Rule #2, he wrote, is not a warning, it is a conversation. To knock is to ask a question. The knockback is the answer. The answer is always, I am here, and I am hungry. The journal was filled with sketches of the cave, but also with frantic, paranoid drawings of a small, unadorned wooden box. He described finding it multiple times, always in a different, newly explored chamber, always sitting on a flat rock, as if presented for him. He wrote of an overwhelming, irrational urge to open it, a feeling so strong he had to physically restrain himself and flee. It wants to be found, he wrote in a shaky script. It wants to be opened. It is a gift, but the gift is a trap. It is his trophy. The journal ended abruptly. The last entry was a single, terrifying sentence, followed Eleanor's voice into the Western Passage. Forgot my whistle. There were no more entries. Thompson had become another one of the cave stories. On the morning of the third day, just as the 72-hour mark passed, he reappeared. Jamie Baird. A park ranger on the morning ATV patrol found him stumbling along a trail miles from the cave entrance. He was alive, but only just. He was suffering from severe dehydration, hypothermia, and a profound catatonic shock. He was unresponsive, his eyes wide and vacant, staring at something no one else could see, and clutched in his hands, so tightly his knuckles were white, was a small, antique wooden box, its surface smooth and dark, secured with a small, rusted iron lock. I met the ambulance at the ranger station. Seeing Jamie was a shock. The cocksure, vibrant young man was gone, replaced by this hollowed-out shell. His camera was gone. All his equipment was gone. There was only the box. The paramedics had to pry it from his fingers. As they loaded him into the ambulance, his eyes, for a single, lucid moment, found mine. A flicker of sheer, undiluted terror passed through them. It opened. He whispered, his voice a dry, rattling rasp, and then he began to murmur, a stream of nonsensical syllables in a language that was harsh and guttural, a language I had never heard before. The ambulance sped away, leaving me standing in the morning mist, the silence of the mountains pressing in, and from the distant, dark mouth of Widow's Hollow, a sound drifted on the air, a sound that cut through me like a shard of ice. It was a woman's voice, clear and unmistakable, humming a gentle, sad lullaby, the lullaby my mother used to sing to me when I was a child, a tune I hadn't heard in 20 years, not since the day she died. It was a perfect, heartbreaking replica, a memory made real. The Echo Dweller knew my name. Now, it knew my heart. The days that followed were a blur of official reports and carefully managed press releases. Mayor Blount, a woman whose smile was as polished and hard as granite, announced that Jamie Baird had been found, the victim of a regrettable but non-life-threatening hiking accident. She praised the park's safety record. Dr. Cross backed her story, providing a medical explanation for Jamie's state involving hypothermia-induced fugue. They were closing ranks, burying the truth under a mountain of plausible deniability. I retreated into Thompson's journal, which now felt less like the ravings of a madman and more like a survival guide. I started my own investigation, my own map. I used my engineering knowledge, noting the acoustics of each chamber, the way sound traveled and echoed, the places where it seemed to die unnaturally. I started to see the cave not as a physical space, but as an auditory one, a weaponized soundscape. I tested Rule #5. Never take the same path in and out of the cave, with a religious fanaticism. I would enter through the main tourist path and exit through a narrow, winding maintenance tunnel. The next night, I would reverse the process. I soon realized why the rule existed. The cave learned. The path I had taken the night before would feel subtly different the next day. A passage that had been a straight shot would now seem to have a confusing fork. The sound of my footsteps would echo back at me with a slight disorienting delay, trying to trick my sense of direction. The Echo Dweller wasn't just mimicking voices. It was mimicking the entire environment, learning the sounds of a safe path so it could replicate them and lead you down a dangerous one. It was a patient, brilliant, terrifying predator. One night, deep in the Serpent's Coil, a series of tight, twisting passages, I misread my own acoustic map. I took a wrong turn. The passage dead-ended into a wall of solid rock, or so I thought. When I turned back, the way I had come was gone, replaced by another seemingly solid wall. My flashlight beam danced frantically, finding no exit. The walls felt like they were closing in, the air growing thick and heavy. The silence was absolute, and then the whispers started. My mother's voice, full of love and concern. "Eli, baby, you're going the wrong way. I'm over here. Follow me." My old sergeant's voice, firm and commanding. "Maddox, get yourself together. The exit is to your left. Move it." My own voice, calm and rational. "You're panicking. Just retrace your steps." It was a chorus of my own memories, my own hopes and fears, all weaponized against me. The PTSD, the darkness, the memory of being buried alive. It all came rushing back, a tidal wave of terror that threatened to drown me. My hand, trembling, went to my belt. The whistle, Peterson's whistle, Rule #1. With my last ounce of rational thought, I brought it to my lips. I blew 3 sharp, piercing blasts. The sound was shockingly loud, painfully pure. The silver note didn't just echo. It sliced through the phantom voices, shattering them. It created a bubble of absolute, profound silence. The whispers were gone. The psychic pressure vanished. I stood there, panting in the sudden, deafening quiet. And in that quiet, I heard it. A single, real, tangible sound. The slow, steady drip. Drip. Drip of a stalactite to my left, where I had thought there was only a solid wall. It was a beacon. A real sound in a world of lies. I moved towards it, my hand outstretched, and found not rock, but a narrow opening I had missed. I followed the sound, and it led me back to a familiar passage, back to safety. The silver whistle wasn't just a call for help. It was a sonic flare, a way to find true north in a world of false echoes. The silver whistle became my lifeline, a tangible piece of physics in a world governed by malevolent acoustics. I started carrying 2. The incident in the Serpent's Coil solidified my resolve. I was no longer just a watchman. I was a combatant in a war I didn't understand, against an enemy I couldn't see. My investigation became more focused. The wooden box Jamie had brought back was kept in a locked evidence room at the ranger station. I knew I couldn't open it. Rule #3 and Thompson's frantic warnings were clear on that. But I could study it. It was old, made of a dark, unfamiliar wood, and the iron lock was of a design I didn't recognize. But the most disturbing thing was the sound it made when I shook it gently. Nothing. It was as light as empty air, yet it felt heavy with a terrible significance. I knew I needed help, an ally in the world of logic. My nightly rambling calls to Elise Monroe, my forensic psychologist friend, had likely already put me on her list of people to worry about. But now I had something concrete. I sent her photos of the box, detailed notes on Jamie's catatonic state, and a recording of the strange guttural language he had whispered. My plea was simple. Treat this not as a ghost story, but as a long-term unsolved criminal case. A case of serial disappearances with a single repeating MO. Meanwhile, Dr. Cross's behavior grew more subtly controlling. She seemed to be everywhere. Her presence a constant, low-grade pressure. She'd appear during my patrols, offering assistance, her conversation always steering towards the cave's natural phenomena. "Fascinating, isn't it, Eli?" she said one evening, as we stood at the edge of a chasm known as the organ loft, where drafts of wind created low, humming musical notes. Certain frequencies, what we call infrasound, are below the threshold of human hearing, but they can have profound physiological effects. Nausea, anxiety, even auditory and visual hallucinations. It's entirely possible that all the voices people have reported over the years are simply the mountain playing tricks on the susceptible mind. She was so convincing, so rational, that for a moment, I almost doubted my own experiences. But then I'd feel the cold weight of the silver whistle against my belt, and know that her science didn't account for everything. She was building a cage of logic around me, trying to manage my perception of the threat she refused to acknowledge. A breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Jamie Baird began to talk, not in full sentences, but in fragmented whispers, in the dead of night when the nurses thought he was asleep. They were moments of terrifying lucidity in a sea of catatonia. I had a friend on the nursing staff at the local hospital, and she would text me the strange things he said. "The walls have ears. Don't trust the pretty voice. The box is a key." Then came the message that changed everything. At 3 a.m. one morning, my phone buzzed with a text from my friend. He just said something really clear. Said it over and over. It opened the box. It let me go, but it kept my voice. A trade. A trophy. The box wasn't a marker left by the dweller. The box was the dweller, or a part of it. A resonant anchor. A portable piece of the cave's malevolence, now out in the world. And it was in the ranger station's evidence locker. That same morning, another text arrived. This one from Elise. It was a sound file. "Eli." I ran a deep spectral analysis on the language Jamie was speaking. Her voice said, tight with excitement, "It's not a known language. It's a phonetic reverse of a rare, ancient Basque dialect. A language of inversion. It took me a while to unscramble it, but I translated the phrase you recorded." There was a pause. "The translation is, the echo is not in the cave. It's in the box. The keeper opened the box. The keeper, not the dweller, the keeper, a human agent." My blood ran cold. I looked at the security monitor for the evidence room. The feed was black. The camera was dead. I sprinted from my small cabin towards the ranger station, my heart pounding with a new, terrible urgency. The box wasn't a trophy. It was the source. And someone, the keeper, had just let it out. I burst through the door of the station. The evidence locker was hanging open, and the small, dark wooden box was gone. On the floor where it had been was a single, fresh footprint from a woman's hiking boot. A boot I recognized. The print matched the expensive, specialized caving boots Dr. Luann Cross wore every single day. The empty space on the evidence room shelf screamed, louder than any phantom voice. The box was gone, and the boot print on the dusty floor was a cold, hard, undeniable accusation. Dr. Luann Cross, the calm, rational scientist, the one who explained away the horrors with theories of infrasound and acoustic anomalies. She wasn't an observer. She was a participant. The keeper. The realization hit me not with a shock of surprise, but with the grim, sickening finality of a puzzle piece, clicking into its inevitable place. Her scientific explanations weren't meant to comfort me. They were meant to misdirect, to keep me from looking at the woman behind the curtain. My mind raced, recontextualizing every conversation, every chance encounter, her appearing during my patrols, her steering me away from certain records, her calm, practiced management of Jamie's disappearance. It was all an act. A meticulous, long-running performance. The rules. Had she created them, or was she just a master at exploiting them? Rage, cold and clear, pushed past the fear. She had lied. She had endangered us all. And now, she had unleashed something. I had to find her. My first instinct was to call Elise, to call Gary, to call for backup. But I knew it was too late. Whatever Cross was doing, she was doing it now. And I knew where she would go. to the one place her research, her obsession, had always centered on, the place where the cave's acoustics were purest and its secrets were darkest. I didn't bother with the main paths. I took the service tunnels, my flashlight beam cutting a frantic path through the darkness, my boots splashing through shallow pools of ice-cold water. I ran with a soldier's desperate urgency, the weight of the silver whistle and my maglite heavy on my belt. The cave itself seemed to sense the change. The air was thick, charged with a buzzing electrical tension. The usual drips and echoes were gone, replaced by a profound, expectant silence. The mountain was holding its breath. As I neared the section of the cave leading to the Whispering Falls, where Jamie had vanished, I saw her footprints in the damp earth, fresh, heading towards a section of the wall that looked like a dead end, a solid face of granite. But I remembered Thompson's journal and my own acoustic mapping. There were voids behind these walls, places the official surveys had missed, and she hadn't followed the rules. I could see her path. She had made no effort to take a new route. She had walked a straight, confident line. She wasn't afraid of the cave. She was its master. I found the hidden entrance easily, now that I knew what to look for. A series of cracks that formed a disguised seam. I slipped through the narrow opening, and the air changed instantly. It grew warmer, drier, and the low, humming vibration I'd felt intensified, resonating in my teeth and bones. I followed a long, straight passage, clearly man-made, its walls too smooth, its floor too level. This was not part of the natural cave. This was a hidden temple. The passage opened into a chamber that stole the breath from my lungs. It was massive, a perfect sphere, at least 200 feet in diameter. The walls were a dizzying, seamless tapestry of petroglyphs, ancient swirling patterns that depicted waves of sound, listening figures, and a great, formless, shadowy entity at the center of it all. The acoustics were perfect. My own breathing sounded like a cannon blast. This was the Resonant chamber, and in the very center of the vast spherical room, Dr. Luan Cross stood before a large black stone sarcophagus. The lid was carved with the same swirling wave patterns as the walls, and it was cracked. A thin, dark fissure ran its length, a clean, modern break created by a tool, not by time. Dark, pulsing energy. A visible distortion in the air like heat haze was seeping from the crack. And sitting on top of the sarcophagus, its simple wood a stark contrast to the ancient stone, was the locked wooden box. She turned as I entered, and her face held no surprise. Her usual mask of pleasant academic inquiry was gone. In its place was an expression of pure, triumphant, fanatical zeal. "I knew you would figure it out, Eli," she said, her voice amplified by the room's perfect acoustics, sounding like the voice of a god. "Your instincts are remarkable. I saw it in your file. The way you survived in that collapsed tunnel in Kandahar. You understand how to listen to the silence. You were the perfect candidate to test my protocols." "The rules," I said, my own voice sounding small and thin. "You wrote them." "Of course, I wrote them," she said, a manic energy lighting up her eyes. "Or rather, I translated them from the warnings carved on the inside of that lid." She patted the sarcophagus with an almost affectionate gesture. "They weren't for protection. They were for containment. My containment. A way to manage the leakage while I conducted my research. You cracked the seal," I whispered, the sheer, monumental arrogance of it taking my breath away. "You let it out." "I let out a whisper of it," she corrected me, her voice rising with passion. "I had to. For years, I studied the acoustics of this place, the legends of a voice that steals echoes. But it was all theoretical. I needed data. I used a sonic drill, just a small breach, enough to let me record the pure, pre-linguistic, foundational sounds of consciousness itself. People died, Luan. Jamie Peterson, maybe dozens of others." She waved a dismissive hand, a gesture of profound impatience. "Unfortunate, but necessary data points. Sacrifices for the greatest discovery in human history. I am on the verge of capturing the genesis of all sound, the very voice of creation. And tonight, she looked down at the wooden box, her eyes gleaming. I will finally open the door completely. She placed her hands on the wooden box. This isn't a trophy, Eli. It's a key. A resonant anchor. It's made from a petrified tree that once grew in the heart of this mountain, attuned to the dweller's frequency. Jamie wasn't a victim. He was a delivery system. He brought the key back out into a world of new sounds, new voices, new memories for the dweller to taste. He primed it, and now she turned the small iron key that was already in the lock. As the lock clicked open, the humming in the room intensified to a deafening roar. The crack in the sarcophagus glowed with a blinding white light. The confrontation I expected, the fight I was prepared for, never came. Instead, the chamber itself came alive. The air grew thick, and a sound began. A low, insidious whisper that grew into a deafening, sanity-shredding cacophony. It was the sound of every voice the cave had ever stolen. 1,000 echoes speaking at once. I heard the panicked cries of miners from a forgotten collapse in the 1920s. I heard the terrified voice of Ranger Thompson, calling for his wife, Eleanor. Eleanor. I heard Jamie screaming as he was lost in the dark. I heard Peterson, the kid I replaced, begging for help. And then, cutting through the chaos, clear and close as if she were standing right beside me, I heard my mother. Eli, baby, I'm so cold. Why did you leave me? I waited for you. The sound was a physical assault. It bypassed my ears and drilled directly into my brain, into my heart. My PTSD, the memory of being buried alive, of the darkness and the silence, came roaring back. I was back in that collapsed tunnel in Afghanistan, the dust choking me, the weight of the earth crushing me, listening to the final fading cries of my friends. I fell to my knees, clutching my head, the world dissolving into a vortex of sound and memory. Dr. Cross stood amidst the sonic hurricane, untouched, her arms raised in triumph, a high priestess welcoming her god. Yes, she screamed over the din. Ah, yes, she screamed over the din. Speak to me. Show me. The Echo Dweller, now fully active, its influence pouring from the open box and the cracked sarcophagus, needed a vessel to focus its power. It had two choices in the room: the ecstatic, welcoming fanatic and the broken, traumatized soldier, his mind already a fertile ground of grief and terror. It chose me. The assault was absolute. My senses were hijacked, my reality overwritten by the Echo Dweller's terrible chorus. I was no longer in the resonant chamber. I was back in the suffocating, dust-choked darkness beneath Kandahar. The weight of the collapsed earth was a physical pressure on my chest. The air was thin, tasting of granite and cordite. And the voices were the worst part. I heard Corporal Jensen, his leg pinned, telling me about the daughter he'd never see. I heard Sergeant Miller, my sergeant, his voice growing weaker, giving me his last orders. You get out of here, Maddox. You live. That's an order. That's an order. And woven through it all, the most painful voice of all, my mother's, humming the lullaby she sang when I was sick, a sound of comfort now twisted into an instrument of exquisite torture. This was how the Dweller hunted. It didn't need teeth or claws. It drowned you in your own sorrow, paralyzed you with your own regrets. It unmade you from the inside out, turning your mind into its cage. I was losing. I could feel my consciousness fraying, my will to fight dissolving into a sea of grief and terror. I was going to die here, just as my friends had, buried alive in the dark, listening to ghosts. Through the cacophony, a single, new sound pierced the din, a high-pitched, insistent ringing. It was a sound from the outside world, from the resonant chamber. My tinnitus, I thought at first, a symptom of the sonic pressure. But it was rhythmic, clear. Shri, shri, shri. It was the sound of metal scraping against stone. The sound was an anchor, a real sound in a world of phantom voices. I clung to it, focusing all my remaining will on that single grating noise. It was Dr. Cross, in the real world, She was frantically trying to pry the heavy lid off the sarcophagus, her crowbar scraping against the ancient stone, desperate to get to the source of the power she had worshipped for so long. Her impatience agreed. It had given me a weapon. The memory of the silver whistle surfaced from the depths of my drowning mind. Rule #1. The whistle hadn't just silenced the lesser echoes. It had created a pocket of true, absolute silence, a sonic vacuum. It fought sound with its opposite. My hand, trembling, fumbled at my belt. My fingers felt clumsy, disconnected from my body. The voices in my head intensified, screaming at me to give up, to rest. My mother was crying now, begging me to join her. I found the whistle. It felt cold and real against my palm. With the last dregs of my strength, the muscle memory of a soldier trained to act under fire taking over, I brought it to my lips. I blew. The first note was weak, a pathetic, airy sound. But the second was stronger, and the third was a sharp, piercing, clean silver note that cut through the auditory hellscape like a surgeon's scalpel. The effect was instantaneous. The voices in my head, Jensen, Miller, my mother, vanished. The weight on my chest disappeared. The suffocating dust was gone. I was back in the resonant chamber, kneeling on the cold stone floor, panting for breath. The cacophony that had filled the chamber was gone, replaced by a profound, echoing silence. The whistle had created a bubble of sonic purity around me, a shield that the dweller's power could not penetrate. In this sudden, stark quiet, I could finally see the entity. It wasn't a shadowy figure or a monster. It was a shimmering, almost invisible distortion in the air, a roiling heat haze of pure sound pressure that had been anchored to the sarcophagus. It pulsed with a weak, confused energy, its primary weapon nullified. And it was then that Dr. Cross, a look of utter betrayal on her face, realized what I had done. She had been basking in the symphony of creation, and I had silenced her god. No, no, she screamed, and her voice, in the sudden, absolute silence, was a raw, ugly, shocking thing. What have you done? I was recording. I was capturing it. Deprived of the chorus she had sought to study, she panicked. She began to scream again. A string of academic curses and frustrated, guttural cries. She was trying to create new sounds, to feed the silence, to give her crippled entity something to mimic, something to hold on to. She had become a willing sacrifice, not for any grand purpose, but simply to keep her experiment from failing. The scientist had become the specimen. The dweller, wounded and disoriented, sensed the new, raw, powerful sound. It abandoned its weak attempts to breach my bubble of silence and turned its full, desperate attention to her. The shimmering distortion in the air flowed towards her, engulfing her. Her screams of rage turned into screams of pure, unadulterated terror. As the entity poured into her, her memories, her knowledge, her very consciousness becoming the new core of its terrible chorus, I watched as her form flickered and dissolved into the shimmering air. Her last, agonized scream becoming just another echo in the silence of the cave. The keeper had been collected. The silence that followed Luann Cross's absorption was heavy and absolute. The Echo Dweller, now incorporating her vast intellect and fanatical will, was momentarily quiescent, processing its new host. The shimmering distortion above the sarcophagus pulsed with a stronger, more focused energy. It was wounded, but it was also more powerful, more intelligent than before. My silver whistle had saved me, but it was a temporary reprieve. The silence wouldn't last forever. As long as the sarcophagus was open, as long as the seal was broken, the entity was a loaded gun pointed at the heart of the world. I was faced with a choice, the kind they never train you for. I could use this precious, silent moment to retreat, to escape the cave and leave the monster behind for the next unfortunate soul to stumble upon. I could walk away just like Ranger Thompson should have. Or I could finish the job, leave no man behind. The old creed, the one that had been both my guiding principle and the source of my trauma, echoed in my mind. The souls of the victims, The voice of my mother. They weren't just weapons the Dweller used. They were real memories. Real spirits trapped in this sonic prison. Leaving them here was unthinkable. I looked at the sonic drill Luan had used to create this mess. It was lying near the sarcophagus. A piece of modern sacrilege in this ancient holy place. My combat engineer training kicked in, overriding the fear. I understood resonance. I understood stress fractures and controlled demolitions. I couldn't fix the seal. But maybe, just maybe, I could entomb it. I could bring the mountain down on top of it. It was an insane gamble. A miscalculation by inches could bring the entire spherical chamber down, crushing me instantly, but it was the only real option I had. I picked up the heavy drill. The Dweller, now a shimmering, more defiant cloud of distortion, began to stir. Sensing my intent, the whispers started again at the edge of my silence shield. Faint, but insistent. My mother's lullaby. A heartbreakingly sweet and gentle melody. It was a lure, a desperate attempt to break my focus. I gritted my teeth, the memory of her real face, not this phantom voice, giving me strength. I had to fight my own grief to save her memory from this monster. I found the spot. A key structural fissure high on the chamber's dome ceiling, a natural fault line in the rock. I aimed the sonic drill, the machine heavy and awkward in my trembling hands. I set the frequency, programming a sustained high-energy pulse designed to create a resonant cascade, to turn the mountain's own strength against itself. The Dweller, realizing what I was about to do, unleashed its full power. The lullaby became a scream of terror, the whispers a hurricane of accusing voices. The chamber groaned, the very air vibrating with its focused psychic rage. The silence from my whistle was beginning to fail. I squeezed the trigger. The drill roared to life, its focused sonic beam hitting the ceiling. A web of cracks spread from the impact point. The chamber groaned, a deep, structural agony. Small rocks and dust began to rain down. I had seconds. I dropped the drill and ran. I didn't look back. I sprinted through the ancient passage, the sound of the collapsing tomb. A thunderous, grinding roar of 10,000 tons of Appalachian rock at my heels. I burst out of the hidden entrance and into the main cave system, not stopping until I saw the pale, blessed light of the moon at the cave mouth. I collapsed onto the damp earth, bruised, battered, and deafened, as the last echoes of the collapse faded into a profound, final silence. The aftermath was quiet. The strange phenomena at Widow's Hollow ceased. The whispers were gone. The unsettling echoes were replaced by the simple, clean sound of dripping water. The silence was just silence. Dr. Luan Cross was declared missing, presumed dead in a spontaneous and tragic geological event deep within the cave system. The story made a few local papers, a cautionary tale about the dangers of solo exploration. The section of the cave containing the resonant chamber was declared structurally unsound, and the entire system was closed to the public indefinitely. I stayed on for a while. Gary and I became quiet friends, two men who knew the truth, sharing silent cups of coffee at the ranger station. He knew I had done something that night, something that had finally quieted the mountain and given his long-lost brother peace. He never asked what. He didn't need to. Eventually, I left. I found a quiet life in a small town far from any mountains, far from any deep, dark places. I found a measure of peace. The nightmares still came, but they were quieter now, their echoes fading. Until last night, I was on the phone, a long overdue call with my old army buddy Frank. We were laughing, reminiscing the easy camaraderie, a soothing balm. As we were saying our goodbyes, the connection fumbled. For a split second, the line was filled with a burst of rushing, eerie static. And in the heart of that static, faint but perfectly, chillingly clear, I heard it. A single, perfect echo of my own voice from that final, desperate moment in the cave, just before the world came crashing down. Triggers it. I slammed the phone down, my blood running cold. The silence in my quiet apartment was suddenly heavy, watchful. I had sealed the monster in its tomb of rock and silence. I had buried it. But I had forgotten one thing. The most important thing. An echo can travel through anything, even stone, and the dweller had had a long time to listen to my voice. The darkness of Widow's Hollow holds its secrets tight, but Eli Maddox learned that some echoes travel through anything. The rules were a fragile shield against a terrifying truth, and the silence, it was never truly empty. The dweller may be entombed, but it remembers every sound. Seriously, if you didn't stay until the very end, you missed the final, chilling reverberation, the twist that reveals the true, enduring cost of silencing the mountain. The last few moments will leave you listening to your own breath. What do you think the Echo Dweller truly is? What was Dr. Cross trying to achieve? Share your theories in the comments below. And if you made it out of Widow's Hollow, if the cave hasn't claimed you, then you're already one of its listeners. Subscribe to Night Creepypasta Rules, because some sounds, they follow you forever, and the silence is always waiting.